Microsoft has released, as part of its fall update, MyCo. Copilot gains long-term memory to recall facts. Copilot will now support multi-user collaboration with up to 32 people. And Copilot for Health uses verified sources like Harvard Health to ground its answers to medical queries. And then Edge Copilot mode turns Microsoft's Edge browser into an AI browser.
ChatGPT released their ChatGPT Atlas browser.
Claude can now load in capabilities like Neo in the Matrix through their new Skills feature.
But what happens when your AI can see the real world as clearly as your map app? Google just wired Gemini's API directly into Google Maps data.
Are people around the world more excited or more afraid of AI? According to new data from Pew Research, anxiety is winning out over excitement.
Would you let AI help decide which embryo becomes your child?
Hey, Jeff, you remember Clippy back in the day?
Of course, everybody remembers Clippy, the little paper clip with the eyes. It's cute. We're worthless, useless, but cute. Cute.
It was cute, useless, and now deceased. And instead, long live MyCo, which is short for Microsoft Copilot. So Microsoft has released, as part of its fall update, it's sort of like a little blob. It looks like a little cloud blob thing, and it's got eyes. And in a fun Easter egg, if you like repeatedly tap it and overwhelm it, it turns into Clippy, which is actually very similar to how I function in the workplace as well. If people click on me too much, I just go into
The Clippy mode.
yeah, exactly. So that was maybe not their most important release of the week, but probably the one most likely to go viral.
It's kind of fun, like a little Clippy, especially the Clippy Easter egg. I love the little nod to history.
I know. I think it's fun too. But they also had some other updates and announcements as part of the event where they unveiled MyCo. So first of all, Copilot gains long-term memory to recall facts and can reference past chats to maintain context. So if you tell it something like I'm running a marathon, any future questions you ask it about your health or your training or this, that, or the other thing, it's going to remember that you are in fact training to run a marathon, keep that in its memory recall. It's also announced some new data connectors like Gmail, Google Drive, OneDrive, Outlook, Calendar. Obviously, we've talked about this a lot on the pod, but these tools are only useful if they actually interact with the things that have information about your life. So Microsoft Copilot will now have access to information about your life, which is a welcome addition. Copilot will now support multi-user collaboration with up to 32 people, allowing users to co-write, plan, brainstorm, and vote together in real time. So it's going to become like a little work hub, which is nice. And Copilot for Health uses verified sources like Harvard Health to ground its answers to medical queries. And then finally, Edge Copilot mode turns Microsoft's Edge browser into an AI browser that can see and reason over multiple open tabs, can summarize pages, perform actions, etc. So the browser wars are, starting to heat up, and now Edge is in the game.
Edge is in the game. Browser wars are heating up. This is a fun set of announcements. I mean, it feels like a lot of catch-up stuff to stuff that's been announced for other AI tools, kind of keeping in the game. I'm not a Microsoft tool user, so this is not a set of tools I've used.
I'm also not a Microsoft user, so I have not used these tools. But I have to say, like, some of the Microsoft announcements sound the most functionally practical for work that I have been tempted to become a Microsoft user. It's just a really high bar, so I'm not sure what the last feature is that would get me to jump over that bar, but some of these features are pretty tempting.
I do think they'll be at the forefront probably of translating. I mean, I think their decision not to be a frontier model generator, but to be exposing those capabilities in context to a user, especially in the enterprise use case where they have all the history, they have a lot of expertise in doing that. I think that's a very smart move for them. And to be honest, I kind of like MyCo. I mean, like the idea of a clearly non-human avatar for the entity to which you are kind of conversing in a chatbot way is kind of nice. I mean, it's for all these worries about people thinking it's personified. Like, it doesn't look anything like a human. Like, you don't think you're talking to a sentient being when you can see that little cloud bubble. So I like it.
Yeah, I like that too.
But for other listeners who may also not be Microsoft users, but wanted a browser that is AI powered, but not Edge, because I mean, let's be honest, Edge is not a big dominant browser share. The big news of this week was probably the ChatGPT released their ChatGPT Atlas browser.
Dun dun dun.
I know it's been a long time coming. I was so excited that it's out, it's available. You can download it. And we've talked a lot about AI powered browsers. So like most of them, this is built on top of Chromium. So all your Chrome extensions and things come in, much like Perplexity Comet. It's available now, although the agent mode is limited to Pro and Plus users. So if you're not a paying user, you get some of this, but not all of it. And it's only Mac OS, which is one more reason I stick with Macs and iPhones because all the stuff comes out first on Mac and iPhone.
So tell me about it. I'm assuming that you've played with it.
I am recording this podcast in Riverside
Oh, you're
in
playing with it
ChatGPT
right now.
right now. So if it crashes, then you know who to blame. You call OpenAI if we have a problem with the podcast. I'm in it right now. It's become my primary browser, and so I'll tell you the things that I saw that are really interesting. There is a split screen chat interface on the kind of a little right hand sidebar that you can pull up with a button or a shortcut key on any web page, and it has access to the content of the web page. Super useful when you're browsing and you want to do a query. You don't want to open a new tab or whatever. You can just pull it up and ask questions about what you're seeing. A feature I haven't used as much, but seems super useful is what they call cursor chat. So if you're in any text input, think a Google Doc, a Gmail draft, any kind of form you're in, you can highlight text and there's a little chalk with Chat GPT button. It's a little hover, like a little overlay over the window, and you can ask it to rewrite or reword or professionalize or whatever you want to do. And it'll kind of work on it in that little overlay. And then you can say insert and it'll go right into the box. So if you don't want to use Gemini to make your Gmails sound more professional, you can just use ChatGPT right in Gmail. It's a pretty slick integration on any website with a text input.
That is actually, I think, an amazing unlock and something that's going to be really helpful because how many times are you like trying to get your thoughts out on paper and you just get stuck on how you're going to word one thing and it totally interrupts your flow? So to have a thought partner right there that can help you like unblock that for yourself so you can just keep sort of brain dumping whatever your content is, I think that that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and to have the context of his previous histories to be ChatGPT, not just it's one of the problems when it's Gmail has a tool and whoever has a tool and you're in Word. So you've got the Edge tool, the Copilot tool. I don't talk to Copilot. I didn't know anything about me or the podcast or what I want. So I think this will be really powerful. I actually really love the new tab interface, which is obviously it just defaults to a ChatGPT search. So not surprising, but it can also search through your web history. It can search through your open tabs in your browser. So if you can say, hey, what was that thing I was looking at on Amazon 2 days ago? It can go find that for you, which is super, super cool. And when the response comes up, it's got these icons at the top. So it's got the standard chat GPT answer, but then you can have web search results, image search results, video search results, and news results. And so like, if you thought they weren't coming straight at the Google, they're coming straight at the Google with this one. And it's pretty cool. Like sometimes now I can do a quick query. If I want more of like just web links, I can just click over on the icon at the top and get those web links. So the last like big feature is agent mode. And so we've had agent mode before, but agent mode operated like in a virtual machine. And so if you needed to log into something, it was a pain. It just takes control of a single tab in your browser and does the thing. And I've used it already a couple times. It was remarkable. I was on Secretary of State website looking for some form I needed to fill out. And I'm like, I can't. So I just was on the website. I opened up Agent. I go, can you find where the place is to download or fill out this form for me? And it navigated like 10 links. And then it pops up a little notification. I could go to a different tab and do other work. And it's popped up. Yep, I found it. Awesome. And then last night, I was on my kids' school's website and it had like their calendar of their upcoming soccer games for my youngest son. And I was like, can I just get a list of these stupid things? But they're like, you got to click through the months and whatever and open up the details for where I say, Chad, can you just like make a table for me with like when the game is, who they're playing, where it's at, and just make the table. And then I go away and I actually watched this one do it and it just opened up the little detail pop over, kept all the details, and it made a table for me. And I went, oh, this is super useful because now any website I'm logged into, it can navigate, it can ask questions, it can do whatever you want right in your browser. This was really cool. And I think will be very powerful for people, not just booking sites, but any of that thing you're going, man, I got to copy all this stuff out of this doc and put it in that doc. Not anymore, right? You can just do it right in your browser. It's super useful.
Yeah, I think this is what we sort of continue to see from OpenAI, which is just like lowering the bar of how difficult it is to use the system. Like ChatGPT can already do a lot of this stuff, but you have to like download a bunch of spreadsheets, put them in a new context window for chat, ask the questions you want to ask of it, but having it just be integrated right where you're actually doing the work and having it be able to do that for you is pretty remarkable and useful. So I'm just continually impressed by their product innovation.
Yeah, and on that note, the other thing, my bonus kind of feature, it's just got kind of a clean interface. Like the options set, it's just kind of like simple, pretty, like it feels kind of delightful, to be honest, which surprised me. I just kind of like, this is like really nicely done. Like Chrome feels like too many browser extension layers. You go through the menus and it's like click over, whatever. And this is like really clean. And they've already announced some improvements that they're going to make based on feedback from users. Things like being able to add different projects when the sidebar chat, which you can't do right now. adding ad blockers. Some of the extensions aren't working right. And so they've already said, hey, we're working on this and this and this and this. And it just one more reminder that they're not just their model, but their product innovation, both quality of release and speed of iteration really seems to be quite exceptional. And I'm surprised they've been able to maintain that. But it seems like they are. And I'm really, it is my primary browser. And so far, I'm loving it. No looking back. It's been great.
Awesome. Well, you heard it here from Jeff Keltner. The AI overlords are delightful.
Delightful. That's right. The clean
Delightful.
fly of the AI overlords got me over my concerns about world domination. And there I am just using ChatGPT Atlas like it's nothing.
Happily, happily. Well, we talked about ChatGPT. Let's talk about Claude. Claude can now load in capabilities like Neo in the Matrix through their new skills feature. So, this is pretty cool. It's a new feature available in Claude. Each skill is a structured folder that will include step by step instructions, maybe code snippets, reference docs, whatever you want it to. And when you give Claude an assignment, it doesn't sort of try to do it all at once. It uses sort of progressive thinking to scan its available skills, choose which one are relevant, and only activate the ones needed for the components or the specific tasks that you've asked for. It also launched a pretty cool skills creator assistant, which is basically it'll let teams build new skills without touching the code. So it's like vibe coding skills inside of Claude, and multiple skills can work together. So for example, Claude could combine like a brand guidelines skill with a financial reporting template, and it can use those skills to produce a polished board deck automatically.
I don't know that I would trust Claude to write my board deck without reviewing it before presenting it to the board. But this was pretty. I think this is pretty cool, and it does feel quite a bit different than the projects, which are just kind of like handwritten instructions and a couple of files, but really kind of modular things you can expose. The brand template, I think, brand guidelines is a great example of like, okay, and you might have a copywriting one, and you might have different skills, and it can kind of combine them to do work. It seems very enterprise focused as well, which seems to be where Anthropic is very focused on that, both API level being the back end coding model for many companies, but all B2B sales. And this seems like a very B2B chatbot oriented approach that they've released. Interesting to see them leaning into that enterprise angle while ChatGPT out there with a new browser for the consumer.
That's true. I thought the same thing when I first was kind of looking at this. It just seemed not that different than projects, but it actually, when you think about it, is really different than projects because when you have a project in ChatGPT, for better or worse, every time you come back to chat with the project, you have to be really good at telling it what you want it to use and not use in the context. And you're like, remember this thing and remember that thing. This sort of feature seems like it's actually optimized so that you don't have to do all of that work and it can instead just remember on your behalf. So I'm actually excited to try this one out. And I have some things that are like this at work where it's like the skills are repeatable, but the knowledge set you might need is not exactly the same skill to skill. And so let it actually run those skills on different knowledge sets is pretty interesting idea.
Yeah, I think it is, and the fact that they're multi-composable. I mean, projects are like you open the project and you have a chat that has just whatever the project's context is included. But here you can have multiple skills that are being brought to bear on an activity, which is really interesting. It does seem very well aligned with what you do. I mean, if you just think about like having a skill that's reviewing marketing creatives for potential violations, like that's a super useful, you know, reviewing copyright. And so you can imagine like job aid kind of skills that can review those and ones that can review external content. And I think it's going to be a pretty cool set of things. At least it's cool conceptually. We'll have to see how well it functions in the real world. But it makes a lot of sense how these are built, especially in that enterprise use case where you may want to build one as a chief risk officer and then enable that for lots of people to leverage in the right contexts.
Yeah, it is. And it's really interesting to think about the sort of future of startups and this type of stuff. When you think about something like a skill, I probably have 10 different vendors that have tried to pitch me on their specific AI tool to review marketing creatives. And Claude just basically unlocked a feature that will probably do the exact same thing as those all those startups. So it's kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, and I wonder if they'll make a marketplace of these skills. I mean, the interesting thing would be you can imagine paying some amount of money to somebody who's preloaded the right context, the right information, the right regulations and rules to do a certain kind of skill. And you're like, I don't want to have to even go explain the skill. I want to be able to go upload my brand guidelines or whatever, and then say, give me the brand guideline scale. And so whether Anthropic builds that or there's a marketplace, it'll be interesting to see if they go from a builder to a predefined set of skills that people need regularly that they're going to enable across companies.
That would be a really interesting idea. I hope they do.
I try to have interesting ideas every now and then. My kids tell me I fail most of the time, but I try. I try.
Well, they're your kids, so they're the worst critics.
They're here to keep us grounded. All right. Well, what happens when your AI can see the real world as clearly as your map app? So this one was interesting. Google just wired Gemini's API directly into Google Maps data. So developers can now let Gemini pull live place facts, hours, ratings, addresses, photos across 250 million businesses and venues, and then render a maps widget alongside the model's answer. So the widget part was pretty interesting. The model decides when geography helps, like if you want a thing, if you want a little widget or not. And if the prompt implies place context, Gemini can call the Maps tool, ground its response, and return sources and a token to display the Google Maps UI. This is interestingly not a feature necessarily in Gemini, which already had some Google Maps integration. But again, Google, I think, leaning into its strengths on one side as a developer tool builder, GCP, a huge place that people host a lot of their applications. And so Gemini has been, I think, a little more successful on the API side than on the consumer side. And so integrating the maps data, which, it's still, if somebody says, what time does X store open? The first thing I do is open Google Maps and search, because I know it's faster than any other mechanism to pull it up in Google Maps. And I know the hours will be there. And so getting all that data about places, being able to be integrated into your own application is pretty interesting, but it is an API story, not a consumer story. So don't go over to Gemini or you want to try and do your Google Maps search. But I thought this was interesting, and Google leaning into that developer angle.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Oh,
kinda interesting,
less
but
interesting for Annie. Too techy. Should have cut it.
it's not that it's too techy. I just feel like Google's, features and information that they're coming out with is just so, niche-y and edge case and not really, transformative the way that we're seeing from, Anthropic and OpenAI. So, this is probably useful, but, is it gonna be transformative the way some of the stuff we just talked about with skills or with more of that context information? I don't know. So, I just feel like it's a little bit too safe, and they need to take some bigger swings. That's my opinion.
Interesting. I do think that the question this raises for me will be, how much does having access to up-to-date information as the models kind of converge on some level on capability of inherent knowledge? How much does having the best web index, as Google spent decades building, or the best database of locations and information matter in terms of the questions people really ask, right? And is that going to be a differentiator Google can lean on? Or does ultimately you don't need to scan the whole web? You just need a couple of, you don't need 50,000 news sources. You need 6 or 10 you trust that you can pull your latest news from. So it'll be really interesting to see if Google's assets from the old world of all this data and ability to pull recent web information becomes a huge asset for their ability to ground answers and real world live information, and it's up to date, or whether it's just a bunch of overhead that nobody wants to recreate and that Google's paying for and isn't providing a lot of value. This is a bet for them that it's really valuable, the maps data they've accumulated over time. Maybe it won't be. And if not, not a good sign for Google.
Yeah, I mean, it might be valuable, but I can tell you in the little, teaser video that they used, it didn't seem that valuable, right? They, have this, "Well, this is a cool new feature," and someone's like, "Show me where I can find barbecue in Houston," and I'm like, "This is not, a really big
On
problem that's
every
hard to
street
answer."
corner, to be honest. When you're in Houston, you want to find
Exactly.
barbecue. This should not require a search at Google Maps.
Yeah, so I was like, "This does not seem like the most, exciting skill that this person can now use this, Gemini API to find out where to get barbecue in Houston and what the vibe of the restaurant is." I'm like, "Oh, Yelp does that pretty well."
That's true.
All right. Well, speaking of what people are and are not excited about, we just talked about some of you and me and our opinions. But are people around the world more excited or more afraid of AI? According to new data from Pew Research, the answer is clear: anxiety is winning out over excitement.
I hate to hear this. I hate to hear this.
It's not that surprising though, but let's go through some of the numbers. So Pew surveyed over 28,000 adults from 25 countries to take the global temperature on AI and found that nervousness outweighs optimism pretty much everywhere. In countries like the United States, Italy, Australia, and Greece, half of respondents said that they feel uneasy about how quickly AI is advancing. And maybe one of the most sad stats in the report, the US shows up as the most pessimistic. So, oh, womp,
Not winning, not winning.
not winning. By contrast, Israel, South Korea, and Sweden are the most upbeat, showing higher confidence that technology will help more than harm. So, when it comes to who people trust to manage the risks, so this was an interesting question I asked of Asked of the respondents, who would you trust to manage this risk most effectively? Resounding support for the European Union. So 53% of respondents expressed confidence in the ability for the European Union to regulate AI responsibly. They only scored the United States at 37%. Probably not surprising since our leader said we were going to lead the way in not regulating it at all. So I'm surprised that even a third of them have confidence in us. And then lastly, China is just at 27%. So people more trust in the EU than in the US or in China. And if you cut the data by sort of different divides, generational divides, politics, culture, et cetera, there's some sharply interesting data there as well. So younger adults under 35 are more familiar and optimistic about AI than those over 50. I would have actually thought it would be the opposite, where young people would be like, "Ooh, I'm really worried about AI taking my job prospects as I'm starting my career," but that's not the case. They're excited about it. And in countries like Greece, the sort of comfort levels diverge the most between the younger divide and the older divide. So pretty interesting.
Yeah, I gotta say, I dislike every result on this except putting China at the bottom for 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 regulating AI. Yeah, this is really fascinating though to see that if we talk about the accelerationist optimist, AI is going to solve all the problems in the world, and we compare it to the doomer, like AI is going to cause all the problems. It seems like, at least from a narrative, public perception point of view, the skeptics are winning the battle of, you know, in terms of the public perception of AI. And I think that's also what expresses itself in this EU, because the EU is certainly, I don't think of them as the most savvy regulators of AI in terms of making great decisions, but they are the most aggressive at saying, hey, we're going to go put some more guidelines on. So if you're skeptical of AI, I get why you would trust the EU most. That's a consistent result, even if I think the EU is probably a little too heavy-handed. And it risks, what I would call the nuclear power problem of like over-regulating to the point where you don't realize the upsides in the hopes of preventing the downsides. So this was interesting to see. I'll be curious to track it over time. And one thing to note is they didn't have a survey of Chinese people in this. At least I didn't see that data. And so I would have thought China would have, I expect if they had, China would have been on the most optimistic end of the spectrum, because they've really been leaning into this pretty heavily there and using it quite in quite advanced way. I think they may not be the most sophisticated model developers, but I think they are arguably the most sophisticated model leveragers in the world right now. And their dispersion attempts to actually start building this stuff into their world and their environment is far more advanced than in most countries. And I think the people see that, and when they see those benefits, they like it, and it makes them more optimistic. So I'm not sure what the data says about that, but that would be my guess.
Well, I think your point is well made. It probably makes the users in China more optimistic, and apparently it makes the rest of the world more pessimistic about like why isn't there more regulation and oversight over there? But honestly, I think that like when this question is sort of a funny question about, what will it cause or who is regulating AI responsibly? And I think what you're missing from that is it's also irresponsible to overregulate it, right? To regulate it to the point that it's no longer useful for us and it's not going to unlock the benefits that we see. So responsible regulation is just right in the middle of too much
It's a
and too
Goldilocks,
right?
right?
It's
You
it's
you got to
Goldilocks.
find the Goldilocks zone of regulation for these things. And
Yeah.
yeah, my sense is the US is on one end of that and the EU is on the other. We got to find our
Yeah.
middle. Got to find our Goldilocks zone.
Exactly. Maybe it's Sweden.
Maybe it's
They're
Sweden.
excited, so maybe they know something we don't.
Go get the Swedes to write our regulations.
There you go.
All right, last story of the day. Would you let AI help decide which embryo becomes your child? So we like to end with some of these controversial ethical topics, and this one just stuck out to me when I was reading the articles this week. Nucleus Genomics just released Origin, a suite of AI models that can predict future disease risk from embryonic DNA. And in a first for the IVF industry, they're open sourcing the technology. So Origin scans 7 million genetic markers and was trained on data from 1.5 million people. And it claims to cut lifetime risk of diseases like Alzheimer's, cancers, and diabetes by over 50%. So families using Nucleus's IVF Plus program, there you go, got to take the IVF and add a plus to it, because that's what we do. Starting at around $30,000, can screen embryos for 9 conditions and more than 2,000 traits, including breast and prostate cancer, heart disease, and hypertension. And what makes this different is not just the science, but the transparency. Nucleus has released its full model weights through an online genetic optimization hub, inviting outside researchers and labs to test, validate, or improve the models. It's the first time a company in reproductive genetics has shared algorithms of the scale. So this is, the company describes this as the beginning of true preventive medicine. But it's kind of preventive in a unique way. We're not preventing, heart disease by exercising more. We're preventing heart disease by choosing which babies are born, by which ones are less likely to get heart disease, which seems very risky. The whole topic of designer babies and picking hair color and eye color and the things that are kind of, the whole history of that is pretty fraught. So what do you think of this, Annie? This was like, I read this and I went, I see positives. I see real risks. I don't know where I fall on this one.
I think if you think about it from an individual standpoint, it sounds very tempting and good. Like, that would be amazing to be able to take an individual and have them be free from all of these genetic conditions that, could shorten their life or cause problems. I think on the like society global standpoint, is future of the species, I see a lot of hubris in this because we've really benefited a lot from like a lot of diversity in our genes and having that sort of naturally evolve over time. And so the risk that you run if all of a sudden, you start to lose some of that because we don't know what we're going to be throwing out and what's linked to those specific markers, right? What are the other things that are linked to that we're going to be starting to weed out of the gene pool? That makes me pretty nervous. And I would not bet on us knowing more than whatever the broader truth of science is at this point.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like many regulations, the devil isn't just in the details; it's in the unintended consequences. The things you do with the best of intents and with maybe the best knowledge and understanding we have in the moment, and you go, oh, oh, we didn't see that coming. So yeah, that's one. Just I love your distinction of on an individual level, it sounds great, but when you apply it society wide, maybe it doesn't turn out so well. It reminds me of some of my favorite science fiction books. These kind of questions. So they're we're now, it feels like we have entered the realm of science fiction with some of these things that feels very science fiction-y.
It does.
Difficult questions, and I'll be curious to see how much, if there's adoption of this kind of technology, does it become a highly utilized thing, or does it just become a model that kind of sits on the shelf and nobody really uses? We'll have to see, but certainly if it becomes utilized society-wide, it will be an interesting, if not scary, future.
Where do you come down? What do you think about this?
I mean, I think I agree with you on the individually, yes, societally, maybe no. I think understanding it is great, but I do think starting to apply it at any scale, maybe the value of this in some ways is that it's only being used in IVF, which is still not a majority of the growth of the human population is not done through in vitro fertilization, right? And so we're not doing, hey, let's pick, for babies born in more traditional paths. So maybe that's a good thing where we can learn a little bit and see some of the unintended consequences or see how things play out in a smaller scale. But it does, if you were to take this concept and apply it population wide, I would be pretty terrified that we don't really know what threads we're pulling on and where we will end up. And depending on the kinds of things you choose, you could really have pretty negative effects. And we're seeing how hard those effects are to change now with the population. 50 years ago, we were about a population boom. Now we're worried we don't have enough babies and population is going to start shrinking, right? The UN has predicted that they already know when peak global population will be. And the Chinese, everybody's go, oh yeah, with the one child thing, we didn't really mean that. We want to have more kids now. And turns out those ships are really hard to move. And certainly if you started doing this kind of thing before you fully understood it at a population level, I think you would end up with a cruise ship that you couldn't turn if you found out you were wrong in the kind of time frame you wanted. And those are scary things. So that's, I guess, my take. I agree with you.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
All right. Well, I think that's it for this week on What the AI, but we will, as always, be back next week with more interesting stories and just regular old head-scratching What the AI moments. Please do like or subscribe wherever you listen. Share this with any friends or colleagues who want to know more about AI. And if you've got a great story or a prompt or anything you think we should cover, drop us a line at email@whattheaifm. Annie, I will see you next week.
See you next week.
Ready to expand your AI knowledge? Want to become the go-to AI expert in your organization? Take the next step with Upstart's AI certification for financial services. This comprehensive course simplifies the fundamentals of artificial intelligence for financial services professionals. Both the course and this podcast are brought to you by Upstart, whose leading AI lending marketplace connects millions of consumers to banks and credit unions that leverage Upstart's AI technology to deliver superior credit products, from personal loans to auto loans to home equity lines of credit. If you learned something useful this week, hit subscribe on YouTube or leave us a rating on iTunes or Spotify. Your support can help others discover What the AI. And finally, share your biggest AI questions and insights with us at email@whattheai.fm. We really do read every message and we do our best to cover them all on the show.